our students seem to reflect this kind of growth and maturation. When they're very young, their minds are like sponges. They absorb everything we give them. In the same way that saplings, when they're very young, they absorb all the nutrients from the ground. The thing is, we need to give them the right sort of beginnings, right? The right roots in order to have them grow and mature into healthy young adults as learners and also in their education. The same way we have it with trees, right? We expect them to bear the fruit of knowledge, in other words, right? So I'd like to start off just a little bit differently and share with you an experience I've had in my education, which kind of left me a little bit traumatized. In grade 8, I had a teacher. Her name was Miss Fantini. I only had her for math, for music and science, thank goodness. And what ended up happening is at the end of most units, we always have a culminating task, right? For our students to show the summation and everything that they have learned. So in music, it was a little bit different. You had to pick a song and sing it in front of the class. So just to kind of give you a little bit of history about me when I was young, I had a very strong stutter. So it was very difficult for me to orally present. And hopefully today it won't come out too much. Sometimes it does, so you might spot it. So what ended up happening is I went up to her and I told her I'm not comfortable with this idea, right? Because I really wasn't. Getting up in front of the class and singing, I already knew and I had the knowledge I wasn't the best singer. So kind of, I already knew that. So I told her that. She said, oh, that's no problem. I'll put you with a partner. I'll even pick a song for you. And I thought, that's fantastic, right? That's work for me. She's already picked my song, so why not? And I have a great partner. She was fantastic at the time. So we practiced. The only thing is, the song she chose for me, if anyone's familiar with Toni Braxton, Unbreak My Heart. If no one's familiar with that, think of Whitney Houston, a very powerful vocalist. So imagine me in grade 8, I have a stutter, and I can't possibly take on someone like Whitney Houston or Toni Braxton, right? Their vocals are incredible, right? So what ended up happening is I went up there, I presented, and it was exactly as I thought. It was disastrous, right? I stuttered through it, I had the hitches, I couldn't pronounce things, it was really tough. What didn't help was as soon as we finished, my partner, by the way, excelled, right? So that was her strong point. So what she did was she gave us the courtesy, as she called it, of evaluating us on the spot in front of our peers. So she wasn't very mindful, I'd say, so she ended up saying, your pitch is off, it was up, it was down, it was completely wrong, you sounded like a mouse. So up till today, I still carry that with me. It was very traumatic. You can imagine as a grade 8 student, you're about 12, 13 at the time. It's traumatizing, right? It knocks down your self-confidence completely. Your self-esteem is just beat at that point. So I took that with me, and if you ask me now to sing, I will never sing for anyone or anything, right? It is just that bad, right? And why do I tell you this? And I always say this to my kids. I always ask them, so what? So why is it important? And they probably get sick and tired of it when I say that, because as an English teacher, we're always looking for that deeper meaning, right? We're getting them to tell me more, tell me things. So I tell you that because the right kind of education does begin with the right kind of educator. It's easy to see that if you have someone at such a young age, a teacher at such a young age, who can knock down your self-esteem like that, it's not productive for the student. It doesn't help them in their future. It actually shuts them off. It makes them close out education. I don't want to learn music, and I don't. Maybe Martin will change that for me. I'm not sure yet. He's offered me lessons. I'm just uncomfortable. Don't want to go there. But that sort of idea, it is traumatizing. It will affect them, and it resonates with them. It's grade 8. I'm in my mid-20s. I'm still traumatized by it, right? I don't want to do it. So, I'm going to be talking, well, just before I get into that, I do have my qualifications in English, right? My specialty is English, it's also phys ed, or kinesiology, and I have some social science and science background, so those are the things I teach. But here at JEI, I run the English and intensive writing programs. So why learn English, right? And we always ask it, because some of my students are like, well, it's kind of useless, I already know how to speak it, and I think that's it. That's English. I know how to speak it. Not quite, right? But English is the cash language. It is the language of the powerful in this country, right? It is the language that if you can master formally, you can go anywhere. It's really easy to kind of speak it, but to learn how to master the writing process, the punctuation, the spelling, these sentence conventions, the sentence craft, becomes a little bit more difficult for students. Okay, so here, the JEI English programs, they do focus on the conventions of language initially when they're very young. We're looking at things like how to use grammar, how to use spelling, how to use punctuation. We all know that punctuation does save lives, right? Let's eat grandma versus let's eat grandma, right? Very different. One is we're implying we're going to eat grandma as opposed to implying we're going to eat her food, right? So just a small thing like a comma makes a huge difference. I can't tell you enough times in high school how many times I've read papers and they've been riddled with spelling mistakes and just inappropriate comma placements, inappropriate period placements. And what that does is it distracts the reader. As a writer, you tend to flounder because now I'm not interested in your ideas. Maybe your ideas were good, but they're so riddled with spelling mistakes. I can't even read it anymore, right? It just, there's a disconnect there. Right? And as Mark had briefly mentioned, we do have the reading and writing program. So after you've mastered your spelling, your grammar, and you kind of know where things go, we move you into literature, right? We want you to read. We want you to be able to predict what happens in a book. We want you to use cueing systems, contextual clues. How do you know what a word means based on where it is in a sentence? We want you to question, to identify the main ideas in the story, right? The other thing that's great is we have different genres. And a lot of parents who have boys know that this is pretty difficult. Getting boys to read is tough. And it is tough right from beginning all the way up to high school. We have so much difficulty getting our boys to read. So what we end up doing is we end up offering different genres that will appeal to them, right? So in the younger grades, we have things like The Absent Author, which is all about mystery. It seems to be the biggest hit with boys. We have things about superheroes, even though it's the Curse of the Balloon Sandwich. But in grade 2, it's fascinating, right? We talk about dinosaurs, right? So this is not at all an exhaustive list, but just a few to get you to kind of look through it. In grades 3 and 4, we hit some more of the classics, and to still keep our boys motivated, we have the historic, the informational pieces, which are more about things like sharks, are more about twisters. So the things that are more upbeat in society and in nature that they're more willing to kind of learn about. We continue through, and then go to grades 5 and 6. So as you go up through our workbooks and through our novels, you get novels that are much more abstract. So now it is a little bit more difficult for them. They have to learn in the earlier grades how to identify abstract ideas. But they are more popular in grade 5 and 6, the books. They are books that actually have movies, right? Most of these, if not all of these, I believe, have movies, right? A lot of the kids find this a big hit, right? The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the movie, they love it. Okay. So I show you those two programs mainly because what we've done is those programs are built off of our high school curriculum. There are 4 strands that we have in high school. We have oral communication, reading and literature, writing, and media studies. And if you were to open to them and look at the description of them, exactly the things that we look for in reading, writing, and English here at JEI is what makes up our 4 strands. How do you use contextual clues? Do you know how to summarize? Can you identify main ideas? Do you know how to make inferences? All of these things you need to know in order to pass high school, or to get through it. So what we do is we think of the end in mind, and we think of all the skills we need to get up here. So those are what our programs for the younger students do for them. Okay. And I have this here because it happens all the time. Your children are given the tools they need for success in mainstream education. They are given the tools. You will hear it from your teachers. You will hear it from principals. I hear it from the schools I'm in all the time when I'm teaching in high school. And I understand that. We do. We give your students, your children, tools. But what we don't do is we don't teach them how to use them. You give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish, feed him for life, right? So what we do here at JEI that's a little bit different is we take the time to teach them how to use those tools. How can you think abstractly? How does metaphor and literary devices, how do they work? Right? Because like this, they will have the understanding they need to go through the rest of their education. Okay, so our intensive writing program. After we've done reading and writing, we have a pretty good understanding of just the mechanics of English. We have intensive writing, which does focus on the other 4 skills that are very much outlined in the Ontario curriculum from high school, which is knowledge and understanding, thinking, communication, and application. The biggest thing, I'm going to get into the details a little bit more about intensive writing after, but one of the main things that I look for intensive writing and academic kids to do is write. They have to write. In order to become a better writer, you must constantly and always write. So this kind of shows the different ways that you can write, right? But in the end, it's just that, yes, you need to continually write in order to become better. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So, why the intensive writing? Going back to this idea of English as a cache language. You must know how to use the mechanics of language, but students also need to know and understand. Grab a bottle of water. Talk a lot, that's what happens to you. They must also know how to write for meaning, which is sometimes something that they lack. Sometimes students are so focused on where a comma goes, on where a period goes, that they forget how to write for meaning. And this is the biggest thing and the biggest focus of intensive writing. We want kids to write for meaning. I want them to think for themselves. Right? I don't want them to just go, oh, my teacher said I have to memorize this and then I'm going to regurgitate it on a test and that's it. Because that's not what English is. That's not what English is anywhere from the beginning, right up until the high school and post-secondary. It doesn't happen. So what I do is I design units. We design units. I know what we're looking for in high school, so I bring it in earlier. I do challenge them. They think I'm a little hard on them. I know I am. But I do it in that way so that they're forced to kind of look at things in a different light now, right? So that then when they get to high school, it's not so shocking, the things that they're seeing, right? They're prepared for the literacy test because we write essays, we write newspaper reports, we write a variety of paragraphs. But in between the formal writing, there has to be fun. So we do creative units, we do Greek myth, we do urban legends, we do things that captivate them and keep them interested. Because if I can't keep them interested, they're not going to be interested in learning how to write formally. The other thing is we have our smartboards, so we do make use of it here a lot, especially to really engage my boys, because I have a class of 5 boys that are all in grade 7 and 8, and this comes in a lot of handy because they're up here, they expel that energy, right? So a lot of the lessons are designed interactively. Now, what happens when we've gone through all 3 programs or your students are now looking to go to high school? It is a big shift. Right now they're going from not actually having studied novel studies to doing a novel study in high school, to looking at Shakespeare, which for many is just a new language. For a lot of kids, it is a new language. They do not know how to read it. It is Middle English, right? So I'm going to run through really quickly the things that really trouble a lot of my students that I see who go from 8 to 9 because they're not adequately prepared. They're not. These are the actual expectations from the curriculum. I'm not going to read them, but I'm briefly going to go just over them. Interpreting texts. Being able to make connections and interpretations of text is something that kids struggle with. So understanding that an open window in a story can symbolize or represent freedom and opportunity is not something that many kids can make that connection. I remember I asked one of my students, and I wanted to go very stereotypically, something that I think they would all kind of appeal to, which was, what does a rose symbolize? And I was hoping someone was going to shout out love and romance, and no, I ended up getting, it's a flower. And I'm just like, yes, it is a flower, but it's not the figurative ideas I was going for, right? So they look at it and they interpret it very literally, which is a lot different. So it's hard for them to make that distinction between literal and figurative. In addition, there are diction and devices that they don't know. So metaphors, similes, cacophony, euphony, they can identify them, but they don't know why authors use them. They don't know how they're used, so they need to understand that. Making inferences is similar in making interpretations, right? Making the connections, using quotes to support their argument. They're not sure how to do that yet. And they just say, oh, well, I believe that the character exists. That's not good enough, right? You need to support your belief, right? Where in the play, where in the novel does it show me that? Right? Developing vocabulary. I have a lot of students who like to use, oh, and it was nice, for lack of better examples. And it's like, well, there's stupendous, there's spectacular, there's amazing, there's a whole bunch of different variety of vocabulary that they can use, and they're not making use of it. Interpreting messages is very similar to that idea. I give you a symbol. Can you interpret it for me, right? Do you know that the heart is not just an organ that beats? What does it symbolize? Generating and developing ideas. This is the one I struggle with the most. My students, I give them a text and I ask them to interpret it, but when I shift to my creative units and I say, all right, create a character, create a Greek myth, a god or a goddess, and they look at me and they're stuck. Because now they have to think for themselves. And they have to create everything from scratch. And they're like, why couldn't you just give me something that I could just like identify or link or anything like that? Because they don't know how to think for themselves, right? So they find that difficult. So generating their own ideas is tough. Spelling, like I mentioned before, I've read essays that are riddled with spelling mistakes. Their ideas are great, their ideas are actually pretty good. But because there's so many things that spelling mistakes cause, I'm distracted, right? It makes the reader uninterested. Sentence craft and fluency is probably the biggest as they go throughout high school. Because what ends up happening is they're writing in very simplistic formats. I like to eat, ice cream and cherries, right? As opposed to showing me that they can construct compound sentences that are far more, far more structured in a different way, far more elevated, and show me that they can use semicolons and colons in a way that's appropriate. Okay, so we offer this, right? We offer the grade 9 math classes so that your children, if they are in that stage, they will read Shakespeare. They will go through Romeo and Juliet because almost every single high school teacher does Romeo and Juliet the first year because it is the most simplistic out of all the plays, right? And it kind of fits where they are in life. We do novel studies, we do essay writing, we do short stories, which are not so short, right? They're like 10, 11 pages, and my kids are thinking they're only 2 pages long, but they're not. And then we also cover, did I mention poetry? That's the last one. Those are the 5 units we cover in grade 9 English. So we make sure that we ensure their success because we expose them to it. So that grade 9 serves a bit of as a review. And then they can work and build those skills in grade 9 for grade 10 and above. Right? And here's the one thing I always tell my kids is I really do like when they challenge me. Not so in a respectful manner, obviously. But I expect that they do ask me questions that maybe they don't like my interpretation of the story. That's fantastic, because I know they are thinking about the text, right? The only thing I ask of my students, which is sometimes difficult for them, is that they come prepared to class too, right? I've created these units for you. I've gone and I've spent time making it interactive so that it's not boring. You're not sitting in your seat, right? So I expect that they do their homework as well. So in order to kind of make sure that that happens, and so that they can't give me, I didn't know. I have their homework printed out for them, but I have a website for them. And even for you, the parents, so like that, you can also see, what is she doing in class? Well, what did they do that day? Are they actually doing work, or is my son just telling me he's not, or he is or isn't, or whatever the case is? The welcome, the about the program, the visit, that's pretty much just for your sake if you want some information on the program, which hopefully won't have to take. But we also have a discussion board, right? So some of the students, it kind of didn't work out so well in the beginning, but with my older students, we still use it. I post discussion prompts, and we discuss it online, and the kids interact with each other, and they respond to one another. But more than anything, is I have an agenda. Each agenda is broken, or the agenda is broken up by weeks, right? Depending on what week they come, they have the unit, right, that we're studying. They have what lesson it is, so that they have an idea. They have a summary or a recap of what we did. For most of that, I always put the assigned homework. They can go back, they know where it is. And if they're not here, you have the handouts, right? Everything is there, so there really isn't no reason why you should come to me unprepared, right? So that's what I'm talking about when I'm looking at student accountability. Right, because I get this one a lot. Thank you, Shirley. And I think this kind of comment kind of sums it up neatly, right? Because a lot of my students, they'll have a project, and you'll say, oh, well, what's your idea? And then they're like, oh, well, I have to be in the mood to write, right? Or I have to be writing on a computer, or something like that. And then you ask them, well, what's that mood? Last minute panic. And I see it all the time. I see it in the work, right? I see that they're scrambling to write. The writing gets farther and messier as they get along, right? The commas are now nowhere to be found or anything like that. Can you move it over, Julie? There we go. Okay, so coming to an end. This idea of you have to have those roots, right? So you have to have that foundation in order for them to be able to understand as they go through high school. So starting early is a good idea. Not for anything, but there is a bunch of research, and I just quoted one of them, the most recent that I could find at the moment, in terms of why starting early is important. Because they have that readiness, they're exposed, they will be more likely to attend school, to excel in their performance in school. And as a result, they might be able to earn higher wages as a result of staying in school longer. Because if anything that I've met that's more sad to me is when I have students who drop out of high school because no one was able to connect with them. Or, I mean, they complete high school, but then they stop. Because for them, it's not worth it. Okay. This is a bit of a different idea. So here at JEI, we're also in tune with the latest technology that the kids are working with. And I know that at a young age, even my grade 7 and 8 students, they already have phones, right? So what we do for some of our older students and some of the 7s and 8s who do have phones, we haven't launched it just yet, that's why I'm putting it out there now. It's called Remind 101. Now this is being used in schools everywhere. Teachers are using it as a fun way to send their students motivational messages, to interact with you, the parents, to let you know if we have. Here our field trips are obviously on our summer camp, but to interact with you and let you know, to keep you informed that, hey, progress reports are coming out next week, so keep an eye open for them. It's a one-way broadcast system. I can only broadcast to you and to your children, but no one can respond back to me. And it goes as a group, so everyone receives the same message. There is a log that is kept, and it is never deleted. And I have a little bit of a pamphlet there. So if you're interested in it, we hope you are, we'd like you to sign up along with some of the students that we have here, your children, because like that we can keep you informed. And if you do, for the intensive writing and the grade 9 preps, I'll hand this out just in a second, we have how to subscribe to this function. So I will never see your phone numbers, even though we have them on file. I will never find out any numbers that your children have for their cell phone because it's a computer-generated number. So no one can see anybody's number. It is very confidential and very private. There are 2 ways to subscribe, via text message or via email. And whichever way you choose to subscribe will be how you get the announcement. So if you subscribe via email, you get an announcement or the messages through email. You don't get them on your phone. So I'll hand those out in just a second. And to kind of end, I just want to end with this quote from Krishnamurti. I know I didn't introduce him before, but he's an educational philosopher, pardon me there. And he's written quite a bit. And this is one that probably resonates with me the most. And it's that there really is no end to education. It's not that I read a book, I pass an exam, and then I'm done, and I finish with it. That's not education, right? Because as soon as our children and our students move out of school, they have the rest of their life, where they have learning experiences, where it's still education. It's just not within an institution. So they are always learning, beginning to end. It never ends. And I think that that's something that a lot of students see that, okay, school ends, I don't have to do anything anymore, I don't have to learn, right? But it's not so, right? So I just wanted to kind of leave you with this lasting impression here from Krishnamurti. I'm going to hand out these handouts in just a second. I'll get some